Hello and welcome to all my students. So today here I am with the ultimate recap of the first chapter of class 12, that is reproduction in organism. Today I am going to teach you the gist of the entire chapter so that those students who have either missed the class or for those students who just want a quick recap, this lecture is going to be absolutely very beneficial. So make sure that you watch the entire lecture very calmly, peacefully, plus all the NCERT points will be covered in this lecture. So definitely not only from the point of view of your class 12, but also from the point of view of NEET, this chapter is going to become a complete one, right? So what are we waiting for? Let's start with the chapter. Basically, first we're going to start with the introduction portion. And now, what is the name of the chapter? The name says reproduction in organism, right? Now, first you should understand the reproduction word itself. What does this word reproduction means? So what is reproduction? Basically, reproduction, beta, how will you define the term reproduction? This word is very familiar to everyone. From since class 6th and 7th, you have been hearing about this terminology. So reproduction is simply a biological phenomena. It is a biological phenomena by which parents give birth to new young ones, by which parents give birth to new young ones of their own kind, right? Isn't it? I hope everybody have understood the definition. So basically, it is a biological process by which living organisms give birth to new offsprings of their own kind. Now, this method, this reproduction can be done in two different ways. One is asexual reproduction and second is sexual reproduction. But before I start with this types of reproduction, I would like to tell you one thing, beta. This phenomena reproduction is very important. Why? Because reproduction helps in maintaining the continuity of generation. Imagine if Adam and Eve would have come on earth and they would have not reproduced to produce new offspring, you and me would have been sitting in this classroom? No, it's only because of the reproduction process that the species are getting continued. And why? Because every living organism has a specific duration for which they live, right? Now that specific duration for which a living organism live is known as lifespan. So next term that we are going to discuss is lifespan. Are you all ready? Chalo. So let's do it. So lifespan is basically the time period that ranges from birth to death. Right? So what will you write over here? The time period that ranges from birth to death. And mind it, all organisms are mortal except single-celled organism. Why single-celled organisms are considered as immortals? Because in them, cell growth and reproduction are mutually inclusive. Like for example, in single-celled organism who can reproduce by fission method, like for example, amoeba. See, a parent amoeba divides and produce new offspring. So like this, when they reproduce, the parent amoeba is actually losing its identity to produce new offspring. So like this, you can say that the parent is not dying, rather it is getting converted to produce new offspring. Now once these offsprings will grow in size, when they will become mature, then again they will also divide to produce new offsprings further. Like this, in such organisms, there is no death concept. They simply divide and produce new offspring. Hence, we can say that in single-celled organisms like amoeba, who reproduce by fission method, where parent loses its identity to produce new offspring, they are immortals. Correct? So how should I continue with the definition? What is lifespan? Once again, it is a time period that ranges from birth to death. How will you continue this now? Now, next line you're going to write over here is, all organisms are mortal. That means everyone has to die one day. So, all organisms are mortal. Except single-celled organism. Why single-celled organisms are considered as immortals? Now you're going to write the reason for that. Because single-celled organisms, in them both growth and reproduction are mutually inclusive phenomena. Correct? Now, as in single-celled organisms, both growth and reproduction are mutually inclusive phenomena. Correct? Yes or no? Understood till here? Very good. Now let's start with the discussion of types of reproduction. There are two ways by which an organism can show reproduction. Can you name them? Yes, very good. Now I'm going to explain both the types in the form of a comparative chart. So please pay attention over here. Asexual and sexual reproduction. Chalo, let's talk about asexual reproduction first. Okay, students, so let me know one thing. If the reproduction is asexual, means without, sexual means involving sex organ. So asexual reproduction is that method where sex organs are not involved. Any somatic part of the body, through any somatic part of the body, new organism can be produced. One thing. Second thing, in case of asexual reproduction, only one parent is involved. It's not like mother has to be there, father has to be there. No. In fact, even only mother or father is there. It's monoparental. Correct? Third, in case of asexual reproduction, beta, offsprings, the new product are absolutely identical to their parent. Whatsoever the parent looks like, both genetically and morphologically, even the offspring is also going to be in the same manner. Right? So what will you write for asexual reproduction over here? One thing you're going to write, basically it is monoparental. Second, no gametes are involved. There's no need of gamete formation or fusion. So no zygotic combination, nothing as such. Very simple, fast and easy method of reproduction. So what is this asexual? No gamete fusion to form zygote is required. Now, comparatively, if I talk about for sexual reproduction beta, in case of sexual reproduction, it's usually biparental. Two parents are required unless the parent, if one parent is bisexual. Usually, parents are unisexual, mother is producing female gamete, father is producing male gamete, and they're two different bodies. But suppose there is a body in which both the gametes are being produced. So there one parent is also sufficient for sexual reproduction. So what will you write over here? Sexual reproduction is usually biparental, comma, but it can also be monoparental. Right? But it can also be monoparental. First thing. Second, here in case of sexual reproduction beta, both gamete formation and fusion to form zygote is a must phenomena. So what will you write over here as a second point? Both gamete formation and fusion is required for zygote formation. Right? This is an important event over here. You cannot ignore it. Like in asexual, it's not needed. But when it comes to sexual reproduction, it is highly needed. Clear? Third, in case of asexual reproduction beta, you have seen one thing, that offsprings are actually identical to the parent. They are both genetically and morphologically identical. But in case of sexual reproduction, due to gamete formation, fusion, zygote formation, the offsprings produced are not identical. Rather, they may be similar. Like you and me, we are the sexual products. We say that my eyes is similar to my father, or my face is similar to my mother. But we don't say, no, that I'm a clone of my parent. No, we are not clones. We are similar to our parents. Correct? So what third point will you write over here for asexual? In case of asexual reproduction beta, offsprings are both genetically and morphologically identical, right? But what will you write for sexual reproduction? Offsprings are similar but not identical. Why? Because in sexual reproduction, due to variations, offspring is not similar to the parent. So next point of difference will be, in case of sexual reproduction beta, variations are observed, whereas in case of asexual, no chance of variation. Correct? Got my point, everyone? Yes or no? Okay, so now we are going to continue further, and now we are going to see methods of both asexual and sexual reproduction. First, we are going to talk about the method of asexual reproduction. Here I am not going to give you much detail, because everything, whatever method here I am going to write on the screen, you have already studied in your class 11th morphology of flowering plant chapter. Correct? So a little bit idea I am going to give you, but you have to revise from your class 11th notes, right? But yes, about sexual reproduction we are surely going to study in detail. Chalo. So now next heading is going to be beta, methods of asexual reproduction. Methods of asexual reproduction. Okay, now in case of beta plants, this there's one different term used. It's just the terminology, nothing else. In case of animals, we say asexual reproduction, but the same thing if it is happening in plants, then it is known as vegetative propagation. So it's just the terminology which is being used differently. Otherwise, both the concept of vegetative propagation and asexual reproduction is same, like ma'am has taught in the differences. Correct? So only that note point first you write over here. Note point says in plants it is known as vegetative propagation. क्या कहते हैं इसको बेटा? In plants, it is known as vegetative propagation. Now, let's continue further. So, how and what are the different methods of asexual reproduction? Can you recall one or two? Yes, like fission, binary fission. I told you, amoeba or bacteria simply divides and produce two new offspring. So, like this, fission ho gaya. Second is budding. Like for example, in yeast and hydra, they bud off and produce new offspring. Third is fragmentation. Any part of the body gets detached and that detached portion starts developing into a new organism. So fragmentation, budding, fission, and regeneration, all these, sporulation, all these are the different methods of asexual reproduction. Correct? So here I'm just going to write the names and okay. So asexual methods with the help of an example. Examples also I'll quote. So binary fission. Example that I can recall is amoeba, all bacteria, prokaryotic organisms, right? Now, second is fission. Oh, sorry, budding. The example which I can recall is beta yeast, hydra, etc. Third, fragmentation. Fragmentation you see in case of algae, in case of mosses, in case of fungi, like lower organism, in short you can say. So fragmentation is more common in case of algae, fungi, and one of the bryophyte, that is mosses. So beta, these are the different methods of asexual reproduction. One more I can recall, and that is sporulation. Formation of spores like zoospores, aplanospores, and all these spores which are again seen in case of algae and fungi is also one of the method of asexual reproduction. Ma'am is not telling the details over here. The only reason is because ma'am knows you all have studied about these words in your class 11th chapter living world. So binary fission, budding, all these terminologies must have been taught to you in living world when you study the feature that is reproduction, right? So shall we continue further? Yes. Now, some methods of vegetative propagation also you should know. Now, in case of plants, if I talk about beta, in case of plants, like for example, rhizome, bulb, potatoes means tuber, runner, offset, stolen, sucker, all these are different methods of vegetative propagation, and again all these terms you have learnt already in your class 11th, and which chapter? In your morphology chapter. So just have a quick look from this chapter and make sure that all these terminologies are crystal clear. Now, the main part of the chapter which is going to be new to you is learning about the events of sexual reproduction. This is now going to be the interesting part of the chapter which you should know. Now, sexual reproduction is one of the most important method for keeping the generation in a continued manner. Why? Because with the help of sexual reproduction, beta, we are able to introduce variations. Slowly and steadily, with every round of sexual reproduction, these variations, they accumulate and they finally lead to a evolution. Like for example, you know all our ancestors were monkey. In fact, chimpanzees and gorillas. But now with every round of sexual reproduction and some maybe due to mutation, all these things has finally resulted into the development of Homo sapiens, right? So how from monkey you became a human? It's all because of variations. It's all because of sexual reproduction. Slowly and steadily these variations, they accumulate and automatically it leads to an evolution. And this is how from monkeys we became human. So therefore we can say that sexual reproduction phenomena is very, very important, and you have to learn first the events of sexual reproduction and then the details of every event. Correct? Shall we start with the events of sexual reproduction? Okay, very good. Beta, we can divide whole process of sexual reproduction into three broad steps as pre-fertilization event, fertilization event, and post-fertilization event. So basically there are three pre-fertilization, fertilization, and post-fertilization. Correct? Pre-fertilization means prior to fusion of gamete. So in pre-fertilization, we have two broad categories. What are those? First is formation of gamete. So this is very important. Till the time gametes is not produced, how can you expect fertilization? So first and foremost is formation of gamete, right? Now, once the gamete are produced, then transfer should take place. The male gamete should reach to the female gamete, so that fusion to form zygote can take place. So second important is transfer of gamete. Correct? Once successful transfer of gamete has taken place, then comes the next step, which is fusion of gamete. Followed by, once the two haploid cells, once the two gametes will fuse, what they will ultimately lead to? They will lead to the formation of zygote. And then slowly and steadily, that zygote develops into embryo. And from that embryo, a new organism is born. So these two steps, that is formation of zygote and development of embryo. So these two are the important post-fertilization events. Clear? So first is formation of gamete, second is transfer, then fusion, then development of zygote, and then development of embryo. Now this is the overall chart that I have given you, very, very important. And now we are going to start learning one by one all these events. First, starting with pre-fertilization, where we are going to talk about formation of gamete. Beta, formation of gamete is actually known as gametogenesis. क्या कहते हैं इसको? This is known as gametogenesis. What is gametogenesis? This is the first event of sexual reproduction where formation of gamete takes place. First point. Second point, depending beta upon the morphology, depending upon the appearance of gamete, both male and female here I am talking about, they can be either similar or they can be either dissimilar. So depending upon the morphology, depending upon the beta morphology, gametes can be of two types: homogametes or heterogametes. Correct? What do you mean by the word homo? Can anybody tell me? Very easy. Homo means same. Hetero means different. So homogametes are those gametes beta which are morphologically similar. Both male and female gametes are identical to each other, like you see in case of Chlamydomonas. But if I talk about us, Homo sapiens, in us the female gamete is round, circular, whereas the male gamete is long. One is egg, one is sperm. So are they morphologically similar? No. So in Homo sapiens, the gametes are hetero in nature, whereas in case of Chlamydomonas, Spirogyra, Eulothrix, the gametes are homo. Homo means morphologically identical gametes. Heterogametes means morphologically dissimilar gametes. Correct? Got my point, everyone? Now, very good. Continuing further beta, how to form gametes. Now, you have seen types of gamete depending upon their morphology. Now, question arises, ma'am, that how these gametes are produced. So, beta, remember always, gametes are haploid. No matter whatever is the situation, whichsoever is the organism, gametes are always pure. Pure means haploid. Correct? Yes or no? So they are always pure or haploid. This means if an organism, if the body is diploid, right, then via meiosis they have to produce gamete. And if the body itself is haploid, like in case of bryophytes, algae and fungi, then they will produce gamete via mitosis. Correct? So now there are two ways to form gametes. There are two ways to form gamete. What are those two ways, beta? mitosis and meiosis. Mitosis is for haploid organism, the organisms who are already haploid. So obviously they will produce haploid cell via mitosis. But organism like us, our whole body is made up of 2n cells. And now from 2n, if I have to go to n, the only method is reduction division, which is meiosis. Correct? Yes or no? So this is for haploid organism and this meiosis is for diploid organism. Anyone having any doubts till here? I hope this ultimate recap is going very, very fine with everyone. Ma'am is telling all the important events and all the important data which is necessary for you to do a revision. Otherwise, you can read it from NCERT and things are going to be very clear. But the details, if you want to take and if you want to make sure that all the notes are written, then go through all the recorded lectures which are already given to you. This is just meant for the ultimate recap so that you're able to recall all the important information which was already given in the class. Right? Now, continuing further, the first event is done. Second is gamete ban chuka hai, gamete is ready. Now, what is required? Let's transfer the male gamete to the female gamete. So, next important event is, yes, transfer of gamete. Where, what are you going to do, beta? So, here, in case of transfer of gamete, the male gamete will reach to the female gamete. How it is going to be done? In beta lower organisms. In case of lower organism, this is done by water. Like you see in case of algae and fungi, this transfer is done via for example, like in case of algae, fungi, bryophytes and some pteridophytes, beta, the medium for the transmission is of gamete is water. But this is not a very reliable method. Hence, the higher organisms, like for example plants, like gymnosperms and angiosperms, they either prefer wind or insect for the transmission of gamete, which is called as pollination. Correct? So, higher organisms, for example, gymnosperms and angiosperms prefer pollination by insect or wind. Pollination via wind or insect. Correct? Yes or no? Understanding everyone? Now, once the beta successful transfer of gamete has also taken place, now what will happen? Pre-fertilization is done. Now, once the two gametes come close to each other, then takes place the fertilization event, which is called as syngamy. What is syngamy? Yes, it's basically fusion of the gametes. Now, when the two haploid cells, they fuse, when the male haploid cell and the female haploid cell will fuse, क्या बनेगा? What will be produced, beta? N plus N, 2N. Zygote will be produced to form zygote. Correct? So this is your fertilization event. Batao bhai, have you all understood till here? I consider yes. If it is yes, then last is your post-fertilization event. And now for post-fertilization event, I am just going to write first is for post-fertilization, zygote formation, and once zygote is formed, then it leads to embryo development. Correct? Beta, zygote is the first diploid cell of the new generation. As a result, it is also called as connecting link between the two generation. Parent and offspring ko connect karne ke liye the zygote is very, very necessary. Correct? In case of external fertilization, where formation of zygote takes place in water, zygote is thick-walled. Whereas in case of internal fertilization, where zygote formation is taking place inside the female body, there zygote is thin-walled. So this much information you have to remember. So next point you're going to write is, it is basically a connecting link between two generations. Correct? Then, second important point that you're going to remember is, in case of zygote, can be either, yes, thick or thin-walled, depending. Thick-walled in case of external fertilization, so that it can be protected from unfavorable conditions, whereas it is thin-walled in case of internal fertilization, which takes place in case of higher organisms. Understood everyone? Okay. Now beta, once the zygote formation is complete, then the zygote undergoes repeated round of mitosis to produce a mass of diploid cell, which is the progenitor of the new generation, called as embryo. And from this embryo then develops a fetus, and fetus develops into a full-fledged baby. This is how the whole reproduction, sexual reproduction, I would say, take place. So what is embryo? It is the progenitor of the next generation. It is the progenitor of the next generation. Correct? Understood the details of sexual reproduction? Basically, beta, in this chapter, you just have to learn the events. Now, how does it take place both in humans and plant will be taught to you in different chapters. Related to human, you are going to study in zoology, that is your human reproductive system chapter, the next chapter. And in case of plant, the method of sexual reproduction, how all these things takes place, will be taught to you in sexual reproduction in flowering plants. This is just the first chapter of class 12th, which is absolutely very, very easy. It's just giving you the hint on how the reproduction takes place. But the details, more detail, that okay, how the gametes are formed, what is pollination, details, types of pollination, everything will be taught to you, but in the next chapter, that is sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Correct? Now, before I wind up today's ultimate recap, I just have one more information for you, that is sexuality in organism. So quickly, let's discuss this topic. right? So depending upon the lower or higher organism, lower means I'm talking about algae and fungi, higher organism means I'm talking about angiosperms and gymnosperms, right? So in case of beta, lower organisms like algae and fungi, since their body is thallus-like, thallus means undifferentiated body, body which is made up of haploid cells. In them, the sexuality terminology used is, so thallus-like body. In them beta, the terminology used are homothallic and heterothallic. Homo means same. So when there is one thallus, suppose this is my algae, and from this one thallus only when both the males and female gametes are produced. Heterothallic means two different bodies producing male and female gamete. Like in higher organism, you use the word unisexual and bisexual. Bisexual means both the gametes are produced from the same body. Unisexual means two different bodies, like Homo sapiens, we are unisexual. Yes, there's a different female body for producing female gamete and there's a different male body responsible for producing male gamete. So this unisexual and bisexual, these terminology beta, you actually use for higher organism, right? Now, unisexual and bisexual. Now, same for the same concept, the terminology is used for lower organism like algae and fungi is homo means when one thallus is giving rise to both the gametes, and heterothallic means when two different bodies are giving rise to male and female gamete respectively. So, have you all understood these simple terminologies? Yes. So, sexuality in organism means the terms which are specifically used to tell that from where the gametes are produced, which body is responsible for producing which gamete. Understood? Very good. So with this, we come to the end of the ultimate recap of the chapter 1. I hope you all have found it very, very easy. Make sure, beta, that you all go through your NCERT and yes, because NCERT is very, very important, not only from the point of view of your class 12, but also from the point of view of your NEET. Solving question is a big deal and you all should practice solving question. So now coming to the homework portion, beta, the homework which I am going to give you is number 1, very, very important, is make sure that you're reading NCERT. This is your main textbook to which you have to be highly focused of. So make sure that you're reading NCERT. And second, solving questions. So you have your own modules, if I'm not wrong. Yes, at the backside of every chapter, numerous questions are given, asked in NEET examination, extra questions. So make sure that you're solving all of them. If you have trouble, feel free to mention in the comment section, ma'am will respond to it. Now, coming to the first question, which is not a pre-fertilization event. Gamete formation, is it a pre-fertilization event? Yes, ma'am. Transfer of gamete, is it a pre-fertilization event? Yes, ma'am. Zygote formation, is it a pre or post? Ma'am, it is a post fertilization event. Last, meiosis. Where ma'am taught meiosis? During the time of formation of gamete. And formation of gamete is a pre-fertilization event. So which is an odd one? What will be the answer over here? C will become your answer. Correct? Yes? Chalo. So with this, we come to the end of the short, simple, quick, ultimate recap of the chapter 1. I hope you all liked it. Thank you for watching me. See you in the upcoming lectures. Till then, bye-bye everyone. Take care. Thank you.